A new roster has been announced for FNCS squads, and I gotta say, it's looking like an interesting roster, right? We have Ninja, we have Nate Hill, we have Funkbomb, and we have Reverse 2K. And I'm gonna be honest, right off the rip, I don't think this squad is going to be good in finals whatsoever, but I do expect them to at least make it and qualify in week 3 and 4. There's a lot of flaws, there's a lot of holes in basically that team chemistry in the team itself. And I think it's really going to show, especially as FNCS starts to really heat up. But first, let me give you some competitive history on this team. And we'll first talk about Ninja and Reverse, right? That's a duo on this roster, and they've been competing for quite some time. You go all the way back to, I believe it was week 5 of the summer skirmish. They ended up playing, and of course, throughout, most famously throughout the World Cup NA East qualifiers for duos. They played, I believe, a total of 5 total qualifiers. In total, if you were to average out their placements, they sit at about 77th total average placements. I think in week 6 was their closest at least chance to qualify. They ended up placing number 7th, just 4 shy of being top 3 to be able to qualify. And that was the weak season elevated into qualifying along with a couple of others. But overall, this duo does have some chemistry, and I think that is going to play maybe a crucial role in the squad dynamic. And then on the other end, you have another duo that has been known to compete together in the past of Nate Hill and Funkbomb, both members of FaZe. And this duo is a little bit more prestigious. You look at them, and they did in fact qualify during week 3 of the World Cup qualifiers. They ended up going and placing 31st at the World Cup finals, a very respectable placing. You also look at Funkbomb. He qualified himself for solo finals. Now, he didn't have the best of placements there. I believe 99th place out of 100, but regardless, he's still top 100 in the world. Same thing with Reverse, who qualified during the solo qualifiers, ended up going to the World Cup finals. He got 90th place, but still, again, top 100 in the world, and that is respectable no matter how you cut it. So overall, you put it all together, right? You got 3 World Cup qualifiers, and you also have Ninja in the mix, and it seems like a solid squad on paper. But FNCS squad warm-ups was just occurred recently in the last weekend, and I had the opportunity to go back and watch the VODs of Funkbomb as well as Reverse 2K, and I gotta say, I wasn't as impressed as I thought I would be. And I'm going to give you 3 reasons as to why I think this squad will qualify in week 3 and 4, but is going to get lost amongst the sea of competitors in finals. And the first reason that I have that will hold this team back is in fact their lack of an IGL. Go back to my most recent video in the BR Rundown. I talk about Team Liquid, and I talk about Chap, and I talk about 72 hours, right? Chap being that IGL for the team. Then you also had 72 hours who was putting him in check. It was great. 72 hours for Storm Surge. You had Chap, who was your main tunneler. He was also your guy calling out the rotations. It's a great dynamic. Meanwhile, of course, you had Vivid and Says Lucky, who were there to, kind of piggyback off of what the IGL in 72 hours was saying. But in this team dynamic, right, you don't have that. You do not have a distinct IGL. In fact, if you listen to any of them, they're all calling out things at random times. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And for me, an IGL is definitely needed for this team. There has to be somebody who's calling out your rotations. And, there was a specific point in the open rounds where I caught Ninja fighting at Dirty Dogs off the start. He ended up pushing a fight when at least the whole team knew that they needed to be rotating out. The circle was really far away. If you guys don't know, Dirty Dogs is right on the edge of the map. And if you don't start your rotation early, you could get lost and find yourself in a really disadvantageous position fighting when you shouldn't be. Ninja ends up pushing a team. He doesn't communicate this, and the reason why he pushes this team is because they're playing in opens. He thinks it's going to be an easy squad wipe. It doesn't end up being the case. And at that point in time, Ninja ends up going down. Then you also see a late rotation over towards zone. They end up all being inside of the Storm. They go for a reboot van in Storm. They get it off. In fact, they get the victory royale. But overall, things like that cannot happen, especially when you start pushing yourself into finals of qualifiers or even the finals of FNCS squad finals, right? You're going against the best of the best. You can't afford to be having moments like that. So an IGL would be great for this team to be able to lock in some strategies and be the final say as to what they are going to be doing versus everybody just acting on their own. Now, the second point is their communication is great for content. It really is. They all get along very well. It's entertaining to watch them, and that I can't deny. And you know, it's great for hanging out. It's great for playing in ranked, but it isn't good enough for competitive. Their communication is very subpar compared to other teams that you were to watch. Mitro's team, for example, right? Mongrel's team, you can even go that far because they at least communicate. And then, of course, you have Team Liquid, which had one of the best communications that I have ever seen. But this team, they're communicating, but they're not really saying a lot in terms of their overall strategy, how they want to develop the game, where do they want to rotate, what fights do they want to take, what do they want to do in late game, how are they splitting loot up, who's going to be taking the bandage bazooka. These are all things that I've heard them discuss, and they all really didn't come collectively on the same page. And communication would drastically help this team out, but that lack of communication is going to hurt them tremendously, and it's definitely going to at least play a negative role when they make it to finals. They're going to fall behind and fall behind very hard. Now, the third, and I think the most important thing that is hurting this team upon watching the VOD reviews, is the fact that their team is only landing at Dirty Docks. Now, having one landing spot isn't necessarily negative. Once again, going back to Team Liquid, they went to Frenzy Fields. That was their area or Frenzy Farm rather, that was their area that they liked to go to, and it worked out, but they weren't contested there for some reason. Now, if they start getting contested, like I suggested, they need to pick up, at least a couple of more spots that they can go and land at, that they're comfortable with, so they can pull an audible if they need to. For example, they jump out the bus to go to Dirty Docks. They don't like it, right? Because there's a lot of teams going there, maybe 1 or 3 teams, as it was the case in the squad qualifiers. They can go ahead and go to Steamy Stacks, right? They can pull an audible and go somewhere else on the map, and then they can have a safer drop, get looted up, and then be more controlled to make it to late game. But they're very convinced, and they're very... they only want to go to Dirty Docks. And for me, Dirty Docks isn't a bad area necessarily in terms of loot, but rotational wise, it's kind of negative, right? Because, typically you have a long way to rotate out. You're having to traverse up the mountains. You have, of course, Steamy Stacks where players are going to be rotating out. They can be taken to zip lines. They automatically have high ground on you on the towers. There's just a lot of different negatives. And on top of that, during the qualifiers, now this may only be because it was the qualifiers, but they were having at least upwards of 3 to 4 teams that were landing at that location. Now, whether that's stream sniping or not, the point is they were being contested, and for every 2 or 3 games they played and landed at Dirty Docks, they would die off of spawn. You're losing some crucial points for placement points that you're not going to be able to regain, right? You're only a max of 10 games. You lose at least for every 2 or 3 games, you're losing 1 or 2. You could have 2 or 3 games where you're literally getting 0 points or maybe 1 point off of a random kill and knock. It's not going to work out for the best, and they need to diversify, find more landing areas. And honestly, for me, if I were them, I'd be trying to find a new area altogether. Dirty Docks could be like maybe in our playbook for plan C, maybe plan B, but I need to find a new plan A because currently Dirty Docks as plan A is not working out for the best. And it's very apparent after watching them in the qualifiers. But overall, the performance I saw during the warm-up was not what I was hoping to see from this roster of this caliber, at least on paper. And I do want to clarify, though, they did have a fill-in. Nate Hill was not playing. In fact, they had a member who was at least a friend of Reverse, Colazo, who was filling in for him, and he's a solid player. He did well, at least consistently placing, top 30 whenever it came to the World Cup qualifiers. He didn't qualify for himself, but he knows his way around competitive, but Nate Hill is still a huge step up from him, so maybe Nate Hill comes into the mix. You've got the full roster. They'll be looking solid, at least a lot better than what I saw, and hey, they could take a complete 180. But overall, this team needs to improve their communication. They need an IGL. I'm going to stand firm on that. They need to develop one, whoever it's going to be. I don't care. But they need an IGL to be able to call the play so everybody can get on the same page versus people just, rushing out, getting in engagements by themselves, and the full team has to come up behind them. Before you know it, they're in a fight they don't want to be in when they should be rotating or just not even fighting in general, losing your teammates early on, going for a reboot. It just puts your team in an awkward position. An IGL would fix all of that, and it would also improve communication. Overall, though, they need to develop more landing spots. Dirty Docks just isn't enough, and I don't think it's working for them. They need to go somewhere else. And if they want to continue going Dirty Docks, they need to stop splitting on the landing. That's exactly what they're doing. Ninja even said in the VODs, hey, we're splitting on our landing at Dirty Docks. It's hurting us. We need to stop that, fix it, and get more together as a cohesive unit. So when we do get in those early fights, if a team decides to contest, we can work together to go ahead and slay that team out. Overall, the competition is only going to get harder from here, right? It's only going to get harder as the FNCS squads is going to start heating up. I stand firm that week 3 and week 4, they qualify, but when the finals come around and they're playing against the best of the best, they're going to get lost amongst the competition.